Now let's talk about a few things to help you out in Matt Curlee's Nocturne. Now, depending on how fast you play the piece, you'll either be using quite a bit of single alternating strokes or a lot of double lateral strokes. On the slower end of the tempo spectrum, you'll be using single alternating strokes, while as you get faster, they'll transition into double lateral strokes. Now, if you're playing this at the slower end of the tempo, make sure those single alternating strokes use that bouncing motion that is the natural extension of the single independent strokes. Remember to avoid having a pure rotation of the forearm to get the single alternating strokes. If you're using the double lateral strokes, make sure that you're using a continuous rotation of the arm that will produce 2 notes for every 1 motion. Now in this piece, he uses some small intervals, primarily the use of major seconds. So what you want to avoid is to turn the hand over in order to compensate to make those major seconds. We want to keep the hand in a vertical position with the thumb facing the ceiling, and think of pulling that inside mallet towards the outside mallet to get the second. That way you'll avoid pulling the wrist over on top and having some awkward issues as far as getting back to the regular intervals. Now, one of the more interesting parts of this piece is the time signature. He uses a 13/8 time signature that uses groupings of 3 and 4. What you want to do is you want to use those groupings throughout the piece. You want to bring the groupings of 3, 4, and 2 out by using natural agogic accents. So giving more dynamic precedent to the first note of the group will help bring those groups out. One way to practice this is by simply playing those groups in a major chord. So let's take a C major chord. So we'll take C on the bottom, E, G, C, and we'll start with the group of 3. So we're going to play C, G, and E with the 4, 3, and 2 mallet. So we want to give just a little bit more to that first note and have the other 2 notes kind of fall away from it. So as opposed to having all 3 notes sound identical. Same thing with the group of 4. Now we'll add that bottom C into there. As opposed to, that helps bring out those natural groupings using the agogic accent. And if you're bringing out these groupings, you won't run into the problem of having a string of 8th notes through the entire piece without any context to groupings or time signatures. The next thing you can do is to mix and match those groups of 3 and 4. And then you can start moving them up and down the instrument just to get a little bit of variety and a little movement in there. That way we'll have a nice representation of that really unique 13/8 time signature. Another thing that's really characteristic of the piece is the use of softer dynamics. So what we want to do is we want to think of expanding our dynamic range down in order to widen it rather than down and up. Throughout the piece, you want to use a nice light touch so the piece doesn't get too heavy. And a good way to do that is to think of a slower velocity into the bar so that you won't quite have such a robust sound rather than a lighter sound. Even though you're moving at a slower speed, you still want that nice smooth motion, and you also want to have the speed going into the bar with the mallet head matching the speed going out of the bar. So still, even though it's a little bit slower motion, you want to try to avoid stopping the mallet at the bottom and having to bring it up yourself. I want to say thank you to Matt Curlee for writing this piece. I've enjoyed working on it a lot. And if you really like this piece, you should check out some of his other music. He wrote 2 other companion pieces to go along with this piece that will be due out sometime later this year, or depending on when you're watching this, it's already out. So go find Matt Curlee. Check out his music. It's really great. And once again, thank you so much, Matt, for writing for this for me.